Ryan Day is now one of the two highest paid coaches in the history of college football. Let's talk about what that means for Ohio State, what that means for Ryan Day, and what we can expect from college football given the landscape going forward. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football 24/7, 365 days a year right here. And if you like what you're watching, hit that subscribe button. Join the more than 130,000 folks that subscribe to the channel and answer the question in the comments below. Do you think Ryan Day is worth $12.5 million annually? And that is the base salary. There are incentives and incentives and incentives that kind of look like the kind of incentives that he was getting before winning the national championship to end the 2024 season and what is the longest season in college football history. Along the way, Ohio State managed to do something no other college football team has done in a single season. Beat top five ranked opponents all the way through, right? So when you're thinking about this, you also got to take into account what the college football playoff demands. It meant that you had to beat Texas. It meant that you had to beat Notre Dame. It meant that you needed to beat Tennessee, that you needed to beat Oregon, in addition to qualifying for the college football playoff per the select committee. Now, how they do the seeding is probably going to change, mostly because Greg Sankey's throwing a stink because, well, the SEC looks like it is losing relevancy, and that's not what he thought the 12-team college football playoff was supposed to do. Meanwhile, Ohio State has shown if you put together a season that we think is pretty decent, doesn't matter that you lose 16-13 to unranked Michigan, doesn't matter that you lose by 1 point to Oregon, doesn't matter that you don't play in your conference championship game. It matters that we think you're good enough so you get a top seed and you get a home game against Tennessee and you get to run the table the rest of the way, winning 4 in a row. Add to this, that offense was awesome, especially when they decided to start, driving the F1 car like an F1 car and not like the Prius, all right? Like, as soon as they decided, you know what, we got number 4 and number 2 and you don't, they started to operate like that. When they went to number 1 in the backfield, they started to operate like that. Didn't matter that they had a patchwork offensive line, for which I don't think Justin Fry gets enough credit for. It's that they were able to do what they needed to do to win the national championship. At $12.5 million, we're talking about the second highest annual contract for a coach in history, behind Kirby Smart, who makes just over $13 million. I guess the question here is, do you think that Ryan Day is worth more or less than Dabo Swinney, given that Dabo Swinney has won 2 national championships in the college football playoff era, and this is Ryan Day's first, beginning his 7th year. He's also having to turn over the staff, which I think means you got to earn your money in a different way. He's already elevated wide receiver coach Brian Hartline to the offensive coordinator position, for which he is expected to call plays. I realize that some folks remember that it felt like Brian Hartline was named the offensive coordinator for a minute, but he wasn't calling plays then. It was still Ryan Day that was calling those plays. And then he went to Chip Kelly to try to get them where they needed to go, which is to win the national championship. And now you can't really ignore what Brian Hartline has done and what he means to Ohio State football when you take into account just what the wide receivers alone have done. From Marvin Harrison Jr. to Chris Olave to Garrett Wilson to Jackson Smith and Jigba to Jeremiah Smith to what Carnell Tate has brought, what Brandon Ennis might do, and Emeka Egbuka, supplanting Zach Smith's best wide receiver in KJ Hill as the all-time leader in receptions at Ohio State. Also, he oversaw the first dude to win the Biletnikoff Award since Terry Glenn in Marvin Harrison Jr., and probably we'll see another in Jeremiah Smith before it's all said and done. Gets to keep the wide receivers, as Billy Fessler doesn't go to wide receiver coach, but to quarterback coach. Also had a new offensive line coach in Tyler Bowen, who was an offensive coordinator at Virginia Tech. Some would say that this is a step down. Some would say it's a lateral move going from the Va Tech offensive coordinator to the offensive line coach at Ohio State. But what I find more interesting about this is 2 things. 1, Tyler Bowen knows ball. Number 2, Tyler Bowen is a hell of a recruiter. Number 3, he was on Urban Meyer's staff at Jacksonville coaching tight ends. Why is this important? Because it feels like these guys that had worked with Urban Meyer at Jacksonville or at Ohio State at some point might be making their way back around. The other thing I think is really important to mention is that Ryan Day is one of just 3 head coaches that have won a national championship in the college football playoff. Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart, and him. Not Steve Sarkisian at Texas. Not certainly not Brent Venables at Oklahoma. Not Sharon Moore at Michigan. Not even, my goodness, man, now that we think about it, Brian Kelly at LSU. Marcus Freeman got close. James Franklin hasn't done it. And you think about the guys that have won national championships this century at Ohio State. Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, Ryan Day. Now, at Michigan, Jim Harbaugh. At Oklahoma, Bob Stoops. At USC, Pete Carroll. At Texas, Mac Brown. At LSU, Ed Orgeron and Les Miles. But those last two guys aren't coaching. You get what I'm saying? Like, the other guys, they either got back into coaching or gone in a different direction, right? Harbaugh's back in the NFL. Pete Carroll's back head coaching in the NFL. Bob Stoops is in the UFL. It's really thin air when you start talking about the guys that win championships who are still coaching today. So you pay for a guy like that. And also been a banner year for Ross Bjork, man, who, quiet as it is kept, was able to fire Jimbo Fisher, hire Mike Elko, get to Ohio State, get the money necessary to put together a winning program, and win the national championship in year one. Like, not bad for the dude that came out of Emporia State and has been doing the damn thing at Ohio State. Like, Ted Carter also looking to give horses in the mouth. Yes, we're going to pay that man $12.5 million. We believe that he is worth it. I think that when you do what he has done at the place that he's done it, you have to reward that guy, and you have to give him every opportunity to go and run it back while you can still run it back in this new era of college football. Last thing that I think is important to point out on the Ryan Day front is his name has not come up for the NFL, not once. That's been really fascinating to see. We've seen Deion Sanders, Steve Sarkisian. We've seen so many different guys get mentioned casually. Even Matt Campbell to the Jets for a while, going to the NFL, and it doesn't happen to Ryan Day. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the man is going to finish his career at Ohio State, and you're paying him that way, right? I have long thought that there is a shelf life on being a head coach. I don't think that we are in the era where everybody wants to do it forever anymore. The money's getting so large, and there's only so much stress that you can take. I think back to Urban and his headaches. Jim Harbaugh has had some heart problems. Like, the stress of the job itself is getting to the guys, especially as they get older. And if you're not in shape to do it, that's hard too. It's why I would always kind of turn up my nose when folks would say you can't be in shape and be a head coach. Look at Marcus Freeman, look at Brent Venables. Both of those guys are in terribly great shape. But I also think that's important to them being able to do the job, because the stress of being on that sideline is just that much. Like, you don't spend as much time celebrating as a head coach as you do trying to find relief. Like, you're relieved not to lose to Michigan if you're Urban Meyer, and you feel the stress of losing to Michigan if you're Ryan Day. One of the ways we compensate for that is we pay you a lot of money to do the job. That's why the CEO gets the golden parachute whenever it's time to fire that guy, because the company is underperforming. It's another reason why I think we're also seeing it trend younger on all sides, right? The coordinators are getting younger, the head coaches are getting younger, because it's becoming a young man's game. It's becoming one where you got to get. Plus, you got to do a really great job with your general managers. You got to do a really great job getting together your roster. There's just so much more that is encompassing in being a head coach now than it was even 5 years ago. 10 years ago, it's a totally different sport. Now that we are entering this stage of professionalizing college football, you're really going to have to pay attention here, and it's really going to have to mean a lot. Yeah, it's going to have to mean quite a bit.